knows? Have to check those lines.
The worst thing if it
I
were
think the
half,
washout is in your district.
No, I don't think so.
Which is the 20th district, so legislative district. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna make it to 2:30 after all, right? Yeah.
well,
Well,
you want to take a
wait
break?
a minute. Do you need to take a break? Do you
We
need
can
to?
take
No, I'm fine, but I don't want to exhaust my colleagues with my inane questions.
We can take a break and she can probably get some
You're
of
not
this
in A. Those are
squared
good-
away.
Those are good to know.
Okay. We'll be back at 2:30.
So.
Okay. We're back for our 2:30 meeting. I see we have our group here, so Kathy, you leading this thing?
Yes, Kathy
Okay.
Funk Baxter, Finance Director, and I'm going to lead the discussion on recording fees and affordable housing. And the data was prepared back in July for this presentation, so just full disclosure. And so we have a presentation to pull up, and y'all have a handout, and we have some extra handouts at the table here. Okay, thank you. So next slide we have, and this is a great picture of a dollar bill and how it's to depict how the $303.50 for recording fees gets split up. And basically into three categories, into archives and preservation. And then some very specific areas for that. Affordable housing is the majority of where the $3.03, $303.50, sorry, goes. And then administration and recording is the third category. So the next slide tells you, for our purposes, and I think this one is good because it shows how much of that goes to the state and how much is retained here at the county. And so on the preservation fees, you can see that there is $1 that's retained here at the county that goes to the general auditor revenue fund, and that's for commissioner preservation. And I believe that's the amount that we use to help pay for a portion of Laserfish where the documents are to help pay for that system. And then the rest goes to the state. And then for affordable housing, of that section, a majority of that goes to the state. But then there are sections that go specifically to our low income housing fund. And the $5.49 is basically for to cover administration cost. And then the $41.18 is for specific program use. And then there's another $8.24 that goes to low income or affordable housing specifically, but a lot of it goes to the state. And then administration and recording, this is where $4.83 goes to our auditors, operation and maintenance, and then $5 goes to the general fund. So out of the total $303.50, you can see the state retains $237.76 of those funds.
These are all. I just would point out, these are all funds generated within our county,
Yes, within Cowlitz County.
and the state keeps the majority of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for specific programs. And those are pretty well listed there. The state home security fund, covenant home ownership fund, state landlord mitigation, state affordable housing fund, growth management planning, things like that. So,
It, it seems to me that the low-income housing versus affordable housing is an unnecessary distinction, but there because of the politics, I guess. I mean, this whole thing is politics, but what is the difference between affordable housing and low-income housing? No, I think I know what it is in principle, but administratively,
we have some slides that go into that, into detail and talks
Okay.
about, and so, in fact, the next slide talks about, of the $303.50, $183 of that is considered a document recording surcharge. And then it goes into how that's split up. And this is the amounts that most of that's going to the state. But the 5491, which basically is 30% of the total funds, is coming to the county. And then, of course, the $1.83 is coming to the auditor's office. In more detail, it talks about, the next slide says, of the 5491, the majority of that, $41.18, is being allocated per RCW to a low-income housing fund. And that's where that portion, 75% of the county portion, will be retained and used by the county to accomplish the purposes of its local homeless housing plan. So that accounts for the 75% of that 5491 is the 4118. And
how do I interpret the dollars under each year? That's
So-
what came in that year.
that's
not-
what came in that year. And so 2020, you see $1 million, a little over $1 million. 2021 was $1.1 million. And then 22 revenue was 728,000. And 22 revenue. And then 23 revenue was only 516,000 in revenue. And then as of preparing these documents, we had collected 314,000 basically for 2024 at the time, mid-year.
But I'd be correct in assuming that the state just sends the money to the county, even though some of it's generated in the cities, and like we saw with Longview, they can request and have their own, but it's not broken down by the state. It's just, the state just assumes it goes to the counties.
Of this portion, it goes to the county. There is a portion that we share of the document
Okay, so
recording
that's
fees.
shown in a different
That's a
line.
different.
Okay,
mhm,
all right.
mhm.
But I think your question still really applies. This is for a doc recording fee regardless of whether it's in town or, right? And then the portion, the allocation of it, the municipalities have some additional control where they can say they want this portion for that currently goes all to the county, like the city of Longview wanted their portion separate.
No, this portion is for the county and for the county's allocation as commissioners that you make those decisions. There's another portion that can be shared with the county, with the cities,
And
correct?
yeah,
you-
we,
so-
we,
If I say something wrong, Deborah's here to help me. Correct me.
yeah, and I didn't, there was the portion that the city of Longview at one point was receiving, and it was a portion of one of these,
Right.
yeah, then
Yes,
we would have to do a calculation on the amount of excise that came through and did some.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is the state isn't going to do the calculation. You're just going to send it to us. And
Well, we
if the
collect,
city wants to do something, then we do the calculation.
yeah, and the state isn't sending us anything. We're collecting this money here.
Oh, it's
And
what
then
we
we-
retain.
Yeah, what we retain, and then we
Right.
send it to the state, what we collect for them, we send it to them once a month.
Okay.
And then, yes, so we would do the calculations ourselves.
That's a reasonable expectation, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Which is a little bit different than the way they collect sales tax.
yeah, it's,
Right.
it's
It's
very
the state
much
collects the
different.
Sales tax, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Usually they collect it and then tell us what we're going to get.
Right, right. This one's collected locally.
Okay.
But we collect the state's property taxes, the real estate excise tax, and we send that off to the
You,
states.
you know, when they collect and they send back to us, they charge a fee for doing that. Do you charge them a fee, Deborah?
Not for property taxes, but for real estate excise tax, there's a small percent that
Small.
we can keep for the administration fee.
And even on this, there's a small percent that's earmarked for administration.
Yeah.
So, but of the 5491, 4118 is designated for low-income housing fund per the regulations, RCW 36.22.250. And then of the 5491, again, 15%, that's the next slide. 15% will be retained and used by the county for eligible housing activities. And that's in the county and cities. So that amounts to $8.24 per recording. So those are also accounted for in the Affordable Housing Fund. And of those funds, this is where we have interlocal agreements with all 5 cities within Cowlitz County. Those were created back in 2004.
It's one agreement
Mhm.
between the county and all the
5
cities.
Mhm. And so,
So a question on that, that one agreement then was overridden by the Longview agreement?
No, that was different.
That's
That was a different percentage. This is just the $8.24 that
Okay.
we're talking about.
yep. So,
You
so
get that? You have to keep track of the dollars.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all confusing.
that's why we showed that first slide, which the auditor's office did. And it's a great slide to show how things are cut up on the dollar.
This one's, it just kind of sounds like, hey, county, do the investment for us. Keep it in the investments accounts.
This $8, this one,
Mhm.
so on this $8.24, we collect it for the year. And we do keep it invested throughout the
Mhm.
year. And then once a year, we do all the calculations to figure out how much goes to each of the cities and how much the county keeps.
Yeah.
Right,
Sounds
based
to me
upon
like
that
it was just
agreement.
More, of, let's have the county invest it and then they can give it to us at the end of the year type thing, whatever.
This one, when we do the spreadsheet for the calculations, we're taking into consideration the assessed value of each of the cities and county and the population. There's a bunch of numbers that go into it that
Oh, so that's an aggregate computation as opposed to a per event summing it up.
yes.
Yeah, so the like she said, the distribution is 1/2 of the weight is given based upon assessed property value. And the other half is based upon the jurisdiction share of population.
Okay. So probably sounds like I'm getting in the weeds, but say you take in $1 million in this fund, it's sitting there. And over the year, it's up to 110 million now. So is the distribution on 110? Do they get to participate in the earnings on whatever it?
Yes,
Yeah. okay.
it's the total in the fund at the time of distribution.
But the interest you make,
Correct.
you keep separately.
No,
Okay,
The interest stays within that fund. This is its own separate fund where all the funds stay there until we distribute them once a year.
The distribution includes the principal and interest, so to speak.
Correct.
This
well,
is
those
such-
dollars for the cities kind of demonstrates the ridiculousness of the whole formula, because you're not going to be able to make much of a difference for $3,000 or $6,000. So it makes sense that they pool it.
Yeah.
And then make sure that the homeless get driven to the big cities.
Yeah, but the thing that's odd is these dollars came from Longview, but they get thrown in the pool. It's not clear that Longview gets back at least the dollars that it threw in.
Oh, yeah, I see what you, because you're using a different formula to distribute them out than,
Then
than
you
what
took it
was-
in.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, in this particular one where there are minimums that
Mhm.
are determined, yeah, the minimums
Yeah.
of the smaller cities, which.
Yeah,
but-
there are
but-
three,
But they pull it, but they send it back to us and they let us keep it anyway, right?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the affordable housing funds that they get with those minimums that are guaranteed, the 6,000 or the 3,000. They don't run those programs by themselves. They keep it pooled with the county.
I think they get these
yeah,
funds.
they get these funds. They're
do
dispersed
get these
directly to
funds.
them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this is separate from that city of Longview scenario we were talking about.
Okay.
This is an interlocal agreement between all of the cities and the counties to get this portion of the recording fee.
So they've been getting it all along.
Yes, this has been going on since 2004. Is that
Four,
when
you
the
said.
Yeah,
the
And we-
interlocal agreement was done?
yeah, and you
So,
can,
and with those calculations in that agreement, it does, there's the smaller cities, there's a minimum that we give them. If it falls below that, they still get that portion.
it might be easier to see on the next slide, the actual distributions for the last few years. And we're not talking about a lot of money, but you can see that the distributions have run in total anywhere from 151,000 down to 100,000, which was
Yeah.
this past year. And those
But Rick, with
cities
the
that have the
interest rates going-
minimums,
With the interest rates going down, we'll see a jump in that figure next year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, quite literally. I mean, it is interest because
you
it's
could,
generated by the
because
purchases of
It
homes.
could start spurring demand, which would move ahead. It's possible, yeah.
Mhm.
Usually it has some kind of lag effect, but
yeah, so those cities that have those minimums, like for example, Castle Rock and Kalama and Woodland, you can see the years that they got the minimums. And those years that they got a little bit more based upon the distribution formulas.
So the $55,000 that Cowlitz County got this year in February. Kathy, what do we do with that portion? Did that get lumped into another fund? How did we spend that?
That,
Yeah, it stays in affordable housing.
it gets moved out. Gina, do you know where that goes? I don't have the, does that get moved into the 18401 fund?
Okay, and it is confusing because it's been historically the revenues,
Who are you?
I'm sorry, Gina James, Health and Human
Oh,
Services.
thank you.
The revenues historically have been split into three different categories. This particular one that we share with the cities is specific. It's affordable housing revenue, and it's has to be used for certain uses that are listed in the RCW. Unlike the other two revenue streams that are larger and the statute says to be used for activities on your local plan. This one is connected to specific activities, and we historically use it to support the emergency support shelter contract that we have, because emergency shelter is one of the uses in the statute. So that's how we've historically used it.
I think the comment I made still actually applies. The money comes in but doesn't go out in the same way it came in, same proportions.
Yeah.
But we're talking about,
You're right, but you're not talking big stuff.
but the thing that comes to my mind is someone in the legislature had to come up with this formulation and it's beyond me if they had any sense as to what they were really doing. It's complexity for no purpose.
Oh, I doubt the legislators did this.
Oh, this was
This legislature said, here's what we want to do. You figure out how to do
the
it.
agency.
And they come up with the details like this.
I said corrected.
I mean, I'm
No,
pretty
no,
sure
I- I agree with you. Yeah.
they wouldn't get it passed. People would be making amendments to help their own little communities.
Oh, you're right.
And then of the 5491, we counted for 75%, 15%, and now there's 10% left, and that is equal to $5.49. And that is managed by Health and Human Services. Of course, that's to help offset administrative cost related to the county's homeless housing plan. So this slide also shows how much revenue has come in for the last few years based upon that $5.49. And so as you can see, it's 180,000, 198,000, 131, 82,000, and then as of 2024, as of July 15th, we've received already 36,000. So we're pretty much on track with that assumption that we'll probably receive about 75,000, 80,000 of income like we did in 2023.
So what kind of recordings are we talking about here? Like a marriage certificate?
No.
No,
Real estate.
Huh? Reals,
Only real estate?
no, Carolyn's on there, online. There's a few different recordings that have different fees, and I don't know what those all are, but deeds of, I think, I'm not sure about deeds of trust, like warranty deeds, real estate contracts, those type, quick claim deeds. And Carolyn's on there. She can answer the rest of
A
that.
quick claim deed would cost me $303.50,
Yes.
Yes, it does.
even if I knew the auditor?
It might cost you extra if you know the auditor.
So the reason I'm asking that is because it's pretty significant changes in the dollars coming in per year. And typically you want to glean as much information as you can out of the data. There's a message there, but I don't know how to read that yet because I don't know who's recording how much of what kind of things. But based on your answer, almost all of this recording is for well, I should ask the auditor. The bulk of these recordings are for what kind?
Real estate. But there's a few that are exempt and a few that have different fee structures set up in the law, but not very many. So like you pointed out, marriage, that's exempt. The fees included with your marriage application to have that recorded. But I always use an example when people talk about how much this recording fee has increased, I use the example of my dad who lives in a very small neighborhood with their own covenants, and homeowners program out there. They pay into a very small road fund. And when you have property owners that don't pay into that fund, the typical practice would be to go down to the auditor's office and file a lien on the property to collect for their required fees into the road fund. Well, now these fees have risen to such a large amount that the fees are more than their entire year's worth of road fees, road maintenance fees. So the homeowners association out there doesn't want to pay the recording fee, which they would have to renew every year. So these property owners are just kind of getting off the hook of these road maintenance fees because the recording fee to file a lien has increased to such an amount.
And they'd have to record annually?
Yeah, because there's something in the law that says it's actually only valid for a year. So it would need to be renewed each year.
Wait, that specific HOA lien or any lien?
Something, I'm not exactly sure if it's any lien. It could be related to HOA liens. I just know that it was only valid for a year. So they would have to renew it each year.
Hmm. I'm glad things are this complicated. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to do.
I know when you deal with the customer at the counter, another example, I have an old coworker that I worked with. She's retired now. She's selling her home and she needed to do a quick claim deed, like you said, to remove her adult son from the home to get it sold. And the quick claim deed, not only did she have to pay for an attorney because we don't make anything easy, she had to pay for an attorney to draft the quick claim deed because it is that complicated. She attempted to save money and do it herself the first time and got it wrong. Paid $303.50 to record the wrong quick claim deed, and then had to go back. It was rejected by the title company, had to go back, pay an attorney to draft it, and now once again pay the $300 and $350 to record because you can't unrecord. I mean, I could tell you stories all day. It's really a tragedy.
I don't think I could handle it.
And I think that you're right. You made comments about the legislature. Recording fees really hit their radar back in 2017. This hasn't been something that has been crazy like this for a very long time. This is fairly recent. And the fees just skyrocketed in a short amount of years. And what you're seeing is legislative additions, additional fees. And so it's building on an already complex structure, and it's a mess.
Okay.
Okay. Then the next slide, basically, we wanted to show you, and this is courtesy of our Health and Human Services Department. They've put together the information about these document recording fees and how the funds have been used this past year. And so this kind of goes over some of the questions that you had. It's on, collects these document recording fees on real estate transactions, and the portion that is set aside for housing and homeless services. There's also a Cowlitz County Homeless Housing Task Force that provides input to the county commissioners for the ongoing development of a 5-year plan to address homelessness in our county, and that's required by an RCW as well. And the funding will be utilized for those activities outlined in the 5-year plan. So, so how does the next one was who decides how to spend it? And that's put before the commissioners and makes the funding decisions to administer this funding. So, and then some examples of the next slide is examples of things that have been funded. And so I don't know, Gina, if you wanted to provide any information, but
Sure, yeah, and
There.
these are what we have contracts for 2024. The first slide is what our, I don't use the word ongoing, but have been continuous programs. So our coordinated entry, emergency support shelter, shelter operations, and then housing opportunities for the Phoenix House. And just a caveat on the allocated amounts that you see there. And we've talked about this before. So that's the amount that's in contract, but we're also, as we've talked about, been looking at, and we have started doing some billing towards our state contract versus document recording fees. So at the end of the year, when we true this up, the allocated amount may not be exactly what comes out of the document recording fees itself, but it's what's in their contract.
So Gene, I think you said something that's easy to overlook. We've talked about how much the state keeps or gets from this fund,
Mhm.
but they turn around and send it back to the counties upon application.
Some of it, yes.
Some of it, yeah, right.
They do, and that's the grant that we are utilizing to support some of these that
Okay.
it can be,
And that's the system that the city of Longview has utilized to fund the Hope Village operations.
I believe they had received a state grant, yes. I'm not sure which one. It's different than the one that we have.
But probably comes from the Department, the Department of Commerce that gives us.
It's Department of Commerce, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so on this list, you don't list campus towers or the Sunrise Village.
Next
Sunrise, I think.
slide.
yeah, there's
Not the
more
name
than,
of it,
that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah, there's
because
more
those
than one
those have
slide.
already been spent, so they're not,
Yeah, and
those
they're
contracts
on,
are already done.
there we go. So we did list Lower Columbia CAP,
And that's
Community
Catlin
House.
and Maine.
That's Catlin and Maine. Family Promise is listed there. You're right. So Habitat's not listed here, as well as housing opportunities for their West Longview project.
Yeah, that's right. We did, well, we
Mhm.
did Habitat after the 7/18
Right.
Yeah.
date.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
These were,
How much did we do for the Habitat? What did we designate for
About
that?
six
was-
something.
Yeah, 6-something, 650, something like that. And we're also looking at a couple fund sources there as well, so,
Yeah, I think, yeah.
yeah.
and so you see the projects that were funded in 2024. And some of them were fairly large, but that's because there had been accumulated also a fund balance in there. So for example, the 2 million was predominantly from fund balance that was for Community House on Broadway. So this is a combination of some reoccurring, but a large portion of them not reoccurring items.
How much are we collecting annually now out of the fund from which we paid like the 2 million?
That would be,
That was around 2 million at one time.
that, I think that would be out of the fund 18401, which is managed by Health and Human Services. That's low income housing fund. That's where that came out of, if I remember correctly.
So,
So document recording fees.
Yeah, it's document recording fees.
so last year we collected 516
Yep,
and through mid-July, about 314. So we're probably on track for close to 600
yeah,
this year.
close to 600 for this year. Mhm.
Which the high year was 2021, 1.1, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's our presentation. If there's any questions. These document recording fees also are part of our financial presentation once a month to you, like we do sales tax
Yeah.
to talk about what the trend is. And, you know, like I said, for this year, it looks like on trend, when we look at through August, we're looking at pretty flat. But it looks like we're going to come in at about the same as 2023.
I
Maybe.
appreciate these. I wish the public would take more interest and do some of this. You might send a copy of this over to the moderators of those debates because they get a lot of this wrong.
You know, I would suggest that we consider this presentation for, or a version of this presentation for our health board. So remember when we interviewed, addressing homelessness and affordable housing was frequently mentioned. And it's like, okay, here's what we're doing. And I think people need to understand that we're doing a considerable amount
I
of
think that's a good idea.
good work.
Yeah,
And-
actually, I agree, but I would vary it a little bit. A problem I see is when we conflate a lot of things. So this isn't specifically to First Order a Board of Health issue, but it does belong in the view of the public. So I wouldn't necessarily throw it on the arsenic page, if you will.
Yeah, so all of our presentations that we've been doing, we're looking at several of our revenue sources and doing presentations to support how we're utilizing and how it's coming in. Those are all on our finance committee's shared drive, and they're available to be issued out, whoever would request them. Next time, our finance committee, we're looking at timber-related revenues to go over that and have a presentation on that in the future. So,
They're very helpful. I hang on to them because I'm sure you guys do too. You get questions once in a while and I say, well, yeah, I can tell you right here. Yeah.
I would add one more point that, as you saw, looking at the history of this fund, it is, the revenue is up and down. It's not reliable. And we have seen a 50% decrease in revenue. And in 2024, that resulted in a big budget proviso for counties from the legislature. I don't know if we will see that again in 2025, but definitely something to look at, because now counties and cities are relying on this funding that's tied up with their affordable housing. And with it decreasing by 50%, they were failing. So I'm guessing you're going to see another budget proviso in 2025.
I just say your clock drives me crazy.
I was gonna say, can't you get that fixed?
I'll work on that.
So Gina, I know that there is a tiny little bit of sales tax that we also qualify for to address homelessness and affordable housing. It's not document recording fee, but, and it doesn't generate that much.
That's the 1406.
Oh, you remember the number even. Ooh.
Yep, the bill
Just in
number.
time.
Yep, the bill number will stay with it forever. Yeah, we are able to reclaim a portion of the state sales tax to use for affordable housing activities. We've used a portion of that with campus towers, and that's one of the sources we're looking at too with Habitat. Yeah. It's not a whole lot, and it caps off at a certain point in the year, so it, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It. We're doing a homeless housing task force meeting tomorrow.
Yes.
Did you want to bring some copies of this?
I certainly can. Yeah, it would be interesting. I did last time, I think, when we talked about the recording fees. Yeah, I certainly can. It might be a little, well, I don't know, the bars codes, I don't know.
The last,
But
I think the last couple of pages that summarize the projects that we've done, I think that's the one that.
I think, yeah, and the whole thing, I think it's easy to underestimate the effort it takes to do anything. Like
yeah,
I use a ridiculous example, like I can go to my shop and I can build a bowl. That's different than building 10 bowls, different than building 1,000 bowls or 10,000. Well, here we're managing funds and there are the complexities that are not appreciated. And the more the public knows, the
sure.
better off we'll be.
Yeah,
And I think the other aspect is part of what you do is try to figure out how many state dollars we can get to spread our local fees farther. The more we can get from the state to do these programs frees up the local dollars to make it available. Because, a year ago we had, Habitat wasn't even on our radar. And yet we came up with a bunch of money because there's some flexibility in some other programs.
yeah, that's true.
Maybe not $600,000 worth, but that's the idea that I think is just, it's good. Part of our job is to make sure the funds are used the right way. So.
I remember a meeting where Karnofsky was talking about for every dollar we invest in the state by paying something or other, we get back $1.60 or something like that. And I think what he's saying is that the state supports us beyond what we pay into the state. And that to me is always an interesting instability. So I, being a smart so-and-so, came up and said, can you invest everything in there? Because that's a heck of a good return. He didn't like that.
Well, the reason it is like that for Cowlitz County is because we have a pretty high percentage of folks who qualify for poverty assistance, welfare assistance, because it's all pegged to that income level.
Yeah.
And that generates more revenue from the state. It's not exactly the kind of revenue we want to brag about, but.
But that is weird because when you take a look at our assets, we've had a very strong manufacturing base for a long time and the ports and all that, and yet we should be in the upper echelon, not the lower echelon.
I wonder about that sometimes too, but I don't have the data from when I would consider the industrial row was all active, with your Reynolds cable, fiber, everybody's going. And that was all, and my understanding was pretty good wages. And I would have thought we would have been a fairly high county, but I don't know the data to prove that.
So as Craig Annenberg is quick to always point out, the #1 American city in paper production is Longview, Washington. Our 3 mills produce more paper than they did back in the heydays.
Oh,
But with technology, they're only hiring about half as many workers.
well, we saw
And that there's a huge shift in that.
We saw that in the tour of the new Westrock
Mhm.
plant, how
Yeah.
it's all so much automation anymore. Basically, the workers are monitoring the automation.
But in just what you said, there's a key in there, because in the private world, if I have 100 employees in my group and I manage to get the same output with only 50 employees, I will have actually increased the overhead, but I will have greatly increased the productivity. And increasing productivity makes the difference between why we in the United States do fairly well compared to India, where they have very low per capita productivity. So we have to be careful.
So the thing that you have to remember then is each one of those workers that no longer is working represents a family whose income has dramatically changed. And when we've seen that result, when I was growing up, Longview rated at the very bottom of unemployment rate. I mean, we had full employment, best in the state, because of all the mill workers involved. We don't have that many, we don't have as many mill workers. And guess what? The poverty rate has gone up. And that's, again, that kind of explains why so much
Right.
government money is coming in.
But that's probably, as mean as it sounds, it's part of the problem. When people in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl couldn't make a living there, they left. And we have the attitude that I want to live here, and therefore, if I can't afford it because there are no jobs for it, someone else has to pay for it. The answer is no, you go where the jobs are,
Yeah.
or you learn new skills.
Which are where?
Yeah.
Where do you go for the new jobs?
I beg your pardon?
Where do you go for the new jobs?
Well,
Particularly if you don't have the education level.
that's where we really sell people short, that we do not treat education as, you've got to worry about future changes. I'm concerned about the real negative swing against a college degree. And I understand the complaints. There are all kinds of issues there. But eventually, if you get to a trade school and you get to be a master welder, those jobs are going to go away. And a truck driver pays handsomely now, but a lot of those jobs are going to go away. So if you're 25 years old now, in 20 years, you'll probably be unemployed.
But, you know, I think as sectors go away, then other sectors open up. There's
You got to
always-
find that, but it's more technical.
You got to be more fluid. I don't think you're gonna,
Yeah.
the days of, it's not a ton of employees that work 30 years at the same place anymore, you know, so you got to be more fluid.
There is.
And I never.
There certainly is that, but I think there is something. I remember being so enthusiastic about world trade, free trade being the answer. And the promise was made that the government will make sure that the workers that were displaced would get the education to get other jobs. And I think if you read biographies like Hillbilly Elegy by Senator Vance, you realize that promise didn't come through. And we do have these pockets of poverty in
Well,
the
that's
former
typical political
Rust Belt.
promise.
Huh?
That's typical of a political promise. A chicken in every pot.
Well, but you don't see, we haven't seen a lot of mass migration to other places to utilize the blue collar skills. Those jobs haven't transferred. And a lot of different reasons why, but so you don't, you mentioned the Great Migration during the Great Depression. That kind of proves my point. That was 75 years ago. We're not seeing those kinds of migrations now.
Well, the issue is, as we have progressed as a society, well, not as a society, I'm not sure we've progressed that much, but as we've progressed technologically, many manual jobs have gone away. And it's going to get worse with time, where if your job depends on operating something and you will be replaced by a machine. But we don't help people understand that. So we actually denigrate science, technology, and math. Oh, you don't want to know math. Math is too complex. I'm not for math. I'd rather take music. Well, that's okay, but there's a price there.
Well, we're all just gonna be AI holograms up here at one point in time. I don't know if this will be working.
As long as my paycheck still comes, right?
You only got 98.5 days. No, you're about now to 98 days now.
Ooh, well, who's counting?
Yeah.
Have we provided adequate
I-
entertainment?
You're the lucky group that gets to listen to us.
Well, we have had some programs, some assistance programs from a handful of agencies who recognize that we do kind of create a trap for people in poverty to get out of poverty. Because if they get those jobs and they earn 1 penny over the limit,
Yeah.
they lose the supports, which makes their lives less viable if they're going to work. That is so backwards. So we need to continue to look for those programs that provide that gradual adjustment as their incomes go up. They don't need the supports as much, but dropping them 100% is counterproductive. Have to always remember people are motivated when there are incentives, not punishments.
I don't know. You didn't meet my mom, I guess.
I didn't say fear, right?
And as long as we're opining, I think we've made it more difficult for the entrepreneurial spirit to take effect. Like we talked the other day about international building codes. Well, you can't go in a garage and find a better way to do it and sell it unless you run through all this other stuff. Or you can't start up a business without coming and we've got to give you a license and we're going to do fees and that. So we've kind of taken some of that. We make it more difficult for people to take care of themselves too.
Tying it back to recording fees, if I get a license as a hairdresser, does that need to be recorded? No?
Licenses.
I think they got to have a license. I had to have a license as a,
No, they have
for me
to,
to do more.
they have to have a license, but it doesn't get recorded.
It's
Oh,
exempt.
okay.
It
It's one
doesn't-
of those exempt documents.
No, it doesn't even get recorded.
I'm not sure if Carolyn's telling her, but I don't think licenses have anything to do with the recording.
And
No,
if,
they have to apply for a business license within a different jurisdiction and depending on what the craft is. So what you're talking about would be a state license. So
does that go
specifically
through
issued-
recording?
no, that's specifically issued through DOL, believe it or not.
What happens if there's, I go to court and a decision is rendered on some suit I was involved with? Does that get recorded or how does the public find out about that? Is that a whole different area?
Yeah, so clerk's recording is very different than auditor's office recording. So those judicial decisions are official records of the clerk's office. Now, certain things, I'll use a land dispute as an example. If you're tied up in a land dispute and those records of the dispute will be held with the clerk's office. However, in the end, maybe an easement agreement came out of that. Now that's a land record that then comes to the auditor's office to be recorded. All kinds of different variances that you could talk about.
And maybe we should remind you, you still haven't fixed the clock.
Yeah.
I would take it off, but I don't want to make you mad. You don't want to see my background. I don't want to make anybody jealous.
I've said before, but when I was doing mortgage, I had a mortgage number and I had a FBI check on a yearly basis and there's a site and I don't remember the website anymore. You could go and look up any mortgage officer across the United States and see what they've done. That's just to make you a mortgage.
The technique in graduate school is you're up before a board, your board. There are 5 people who presumably are experts in their field, and your job is to get them arguing amongst themselves so that 3 or 4 hours go by and they say, gee, this must be a good guy, and then,
Off you go. Yeah.
yes, I've tried it.
Okay. We
Any
appreciate your
comments from the
time.
public?
If there's comments from the public? No? Okay. Thanks for your time. And once again, I always appreciate these. I think they're very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.